The judge set Trump's next hearing for August 28th. That's 5 days after the first Republican primary debate. But Trump does not have to appear in person at that court appearance. We have Queen City News Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes here with us now, resting up from our hours-long coverage yesterday. So, Khalif, we have a whole lot to get to after all of this. What are the conditions of Trump's release? First of all, what is he allowed to do and not allowed to do?
Well, the main thing is that he can't commit any crime while he's out. Obviously, that would be an immediate violation of his conditions for release. The second thing is that the judge didn't add anything like no travel restrictions, wasn't required to take his passport. He was a written promise to appear, and so he didn't have to post any type of bond. But the biggest condition for his release is that he can't have communication with any witness that's involved in the case unless it's through about the case, unless it's through their attorney. And that's similar to the conditions of release that were set in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. And so that may be something that could be an extra condition that he may have trouble dealing with, for sure.
Well, right, and that's all because former Vice President Mike Pence might be a star witness for the prosecution. Can Trump debate him? Because we know that those are coming up.
Well, first of all, the former vice president needs to be able to make the stage, and at this moment, he hasn't made the stage. Additionally, when we talk about appearances where the former president doesn't have to appear in court, he also hasn't committed to appearing at the debates. He speculated in the past that the only reason not to participate in this debate would be to give these other people in the race an opportunity to take shots at the front runner. So he has everything to lose by appearing in debates and nothing to gain. And so if I'm advising him on the political side, I'm saying, well, why are you there? You got a 34% lead over everyone. Your closest opponent is DeSantis. And if you give him an opportunity to chop you down at this debate, it only could hurt you. So if he appears at this debate, obviously there's a couple loopholes in those conditions where he could still talk to Mike Pence, the former vice president, specifically have an attorney in the crowd. If his attorney's in the crowd, then that meets the condition.
Okay.
And then the other option is just don't talk about what happened on January 6th or this case. You can talk about your record. You can talk about a number of things, but you don't want to talk about you're facing 3 indictments. Now, the former vice president may bring that up and say, hey, he's unfit for office because he's facing these charges. It doesn't say that Mike Pence can't talk about it. It just says that the former president can't talk about the things that he's facing. But again, I think that would be a long shot for any of those things to happen because obviously the former president, Trump, needs to make a decision if he's going to even appear. He's clearly qualified. He met the threshold individual numbers, and he's met the polling. And so at least 1% in any national or state-recognized poll, he clearly meets that for sure. So he just needs to decide if he wants to go.
Yeah.
And if he wants to listen to his attorney's advice on not to address these current charges and or not directly talk to Mike Pence outside the presence of his attorney.
Well, yeah, and just pretending here, Pence actually spoke about the possibility of debating his former boss at a campaign event this week. So let's listen to what he had to say.
If you're unable to qualify for the first debate, are you planning to withdraw from the race?
I'm very confident we're going to qualify for the first debate. Support continues to surge in. We haven't offered kickbacks or soccer tickets or gift cards. We're just accepting support at MikePence2024.com, and it's coming in strong. So I look forward to being in Milwaukee and can't wait to have a debate about the future of the Republican Party because elections are about the future.
Right, so we heard that little plug there. That's because Pence has met the polling threshold, but he hasn't met the donor threshold yet. So if he were to make the debate stage, what do you think would go down here outside of bringing up these indictments?
I mean, that's the only way that he jumps up into the polls. I mean, obviously, from the very night that the incident happened, he took a stance and said, I'll stand up for the Constitution. He gave that speech right in the Capitol where he talked about how this is not the place for these types of events to happen. And I thought it was well written and it was well delivered. If he can touch on those individuals that he was speaking to that night and try to garner some of those people to support him, I think it could show him a shift in the polls. But he has a lot of ground to cover. I mean, he'd have to triple where he's at now to even be considered a true contender. That would even allow him to take over DeSantis. So he'd have to do something amazing. But the only thing that you could do is throw his record, the former President Trump's record, current 3 charges, I should say, not his record, but his 3 charges, his 3 indictments out against him. The only issue is that won't really help him. Currently, we're seeing, if anything, those indictments are strengthening the former president.
Helping.
So it's not, I don't think there's anything that he could say that would help him. But being on the stage, if anything, in the legal aspect, the government has to prove the former president's state of mind at the time. And former Vice President Pence has done a great job of laying out how Trump's mindset was at that time. That at that time, he wanted to go forward with this idea of that I've won the election, and he says, I don't want to go forward with that because you didn't win it, and the Constitution requires me to do a number of things. So he is a star witness for the prosecution, for sure.
And once again, we are heading into uncharted territory, so we will just learn day by day here. Khalif, thanks so much. And you can count on Queen City News to deliver the latest on Trump's current and potentially future indictments. You can follow the latest developments on our website, qcnews.com.